Framing of the Indian Constitution. Now we will see how the Constitution of India was framed. Constitution of India was framed by a specialized body called as the Constituent Assembly. Now the Constituent Assembly of India was constituted under the Cabinet Mission Plan, which was given by the British. Initially, the Constituent Assembly consisted of members of both British India as well as the princely states. Now, the members of the Constituent Assembly were supposed to be partly elected and partly nominated. That is, the members from the British India were to be elected by the elected representatives of the provincial assemblies, whereas when it comes to princely states, the members from the princely states were to be nominated by their respective rulers. Now, there was much optimism when it comes to the framing of the Indian Constitution. Constituent Assembly of India represented the free voice of India, the Indians who are going to make law to govern themselves, not something which was brought down from the England and imposed on India. Now, people from all the walks of life had an opportunity to have a say in the laws which are going to guide them. Now, the Constituent Assembly, as I told earlier, was to be partly elected and partly nominated. Now, the things have changed in 1947. In 1947, Mountbatten Plan was passed, according to which India was to be divided into two countries, that is Pakistan and the Republic of India. Now, Indians had their own aspirations. They are supposed to make their own future for their governance. So, the lapse of paramountcy posed another big problem when it comes to the Constituent Assembly. What happened is, as soon as India was to become independent in the year 1947, there was this apprehension that the supreme lordship of the Britishers over the Indian subcontinent was to be lost. It will be gone. Now, when this is the situation, some of the princely states had the apprehensions, or they had in fact the aspirations to become the independent nations, like states of Jammu and Kashmir, the state of Hyderabad. They wanted to remain independent. Nevertheless, in the year 1950, these two states merged into the Indian Union. But prior to that, they did not send any kind of members to the Constituent Assembly, whereas the other princely states, they sent so. So, the task before the Constituent Assembly was humongous. It was very vast to draft a constitution for a geographically vast nation, diverse population. So, in such kind of situation, it became a Herculean task for the Constituent Assembly to draft a constitution which is acceptable to all the nook and corners of the country, each and every person of the country. So, what they have done? First session, the Constituent Assembly assembled together and they elected in fact Dr. Rajendra Prasad to preside over the sessions of the Constituent Assembly. Now, at this same time, Constituent Assembly of India also acted as the interim Parliament of India until the elections were held in the year 1951. So, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the President of the Constituent Assembly, and the workings of the Constituent Assembly, which we see, was given or entrusted to the various committees as well as subcommittees, Fundamental Rights Committee, then Center-State Relations Committee, you had Drafting Committee, and in fact, Drafting Committee formed the most important committee of the entire Constituent Assembly. The ultimate drafts, preparation of draft and incorporation of amendments, etc. was done by the Drafting Committee, which was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was instrumental in giving final shape to the present day Constitution. On 26th November 1949, the task of completion of Constitution was done and it was signed by all the members. On 26 January 1950, the constitution came into full force. So now the Constituent Assembly, composition of the Constituent Assembly has to be taken into consideration. And we are seeing and we have to see that what was the vision as envisaged by the members of the Constituent Assembly. Now the drafting process. The drafting process is the most difficult process in preparation of the Constitution or for that matter any other law. Now, Constituent Assembly had duly deliberated from time to time on each and every provision of the Constitution. The provisions of the Constitution as it stands today is the net result of the intense debates which were conducted. So, the debates of each and every provision of the Constitution, you can easily find them online on the website of the Constitution of India as well as Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, popularly known as Constituent Assembly debates. So, the general process was, first the draft clause will be put or placed before the House. The House will adopt that particular draft clause, and after that draft clause has been adopted, all the members were asked to express their opinions. Some of the members expressed their reservations, some of them outrightly rejected it. So some of them even recommended certain amendments. So all these things will be discussed at the floor of the House, and after all those discussions, all these amendments, changes, etc. will be put to vote, and if that particular resolution attained or got the majority, then in that particular situation, that particular clause formed the part of the Constitution. So each and every clause by clause, different areas were drafted in such a manner. And in certain areas of the Constitution like fundamental rights, etc., there was much debate, and majority of the debates in the Constitution pertains to the areas concerning the fundamental rights as well as the division of powers between center and states. And we can see, if we go through the Constituent Assembly debates, we can clearly see that there was a very healthy debate and healthy competition. Unlike these days where we find that there will be much disruptions in the House, there in those era, the disruptions were there but for positive reasons. Positive criticism was there, constructive criticism was there, and there was give and take between the members. If a member was not agreeing with any kind of provision of law, he used to suggest alternate measures, and alternate measures were taken in a sportive manner by the majority party. So it was due deliberation between the barristers, all the persons who were legal luminaries, who had the rich experience in the legal fields and the struggle for Indian freedom. So these members constituted the Constituent Assembly, whose task was to draft the Constitution. So there were many challenging areas. That is, for instance, we can see whether to have a theological state or whether to have a secular state or whether to have a state giving special privileges to a particular religious community, that is particularly the aspect of secularism itself finds that there was much debate on this particular topic also. There was one particular section in the Constituent Assembly which said that there should be no use for religion in the public space at all. Some people said that no, state should be given some say in the matters of religion in order to prevent the religious evils or evils perpetrated in the name of religion, and so on and so forth. So like this, we will find that there was much deliberation when it comes to the Constituent Assembly and when it comes to the various aspects or various things or various articles. Now, after these clauses were passed with or without amendments, they were compiled together and drafted into the final form of the Constitution. You will find itself that the Constitution as it was passed on 26th November 1949 was itself a handwritten Constitution. There was some sort of artistic element to the Constitution itself. The Constitution, all the pages had the illustrations from the rich cultural past and legacy of Indian history, right from the Harappan civilization to the freedom struggle. Then you had all the writings being done by the renowned artists from the Shantiniketan. So all the Constitution of India, the original text of the Constitution of India represents not only the intellectual brain of the Indians, but also it represents the cultural legacy of the Indians. Now, when it comes to the total strength of the Constituent Assembly, it was supposed to be more than 300 members, but as soon as Mountbatten Plan was announced to partition the country into India as well as Pakistan, here we will find that the members from the areas which are going to be formed into the new independent state of Pakistan, they withdrew from the Constituent Assembly of India and the strength came down to 299 members. And out of those 299 members, majority of them were lawyers, or in fact in those days they were known as barristers. So that is the reason we have so much of intricacies, legal intricacies built into our constitution, and that is in fact has contributed to the overall bulkiness of the Indian constitution. And out of 299, we will find that there were only 15 women who were the members of Constituent Assembly, which was in fact very less compared to the strength of men, and which was very less compared to the present day strength of members in the legislative assemblies. It was for mainly two reasons. That is, number one, that is at that particular point of time, the general literacy level was very low, and women being educated in that particular time was a Herculean task. It was not that easy, and it was in some cases viewed as against the societal norms. So in that particular era, we had only 15 women from various diverse backgrounds. Second reason is you didn't have many women who were active in the political life. They may be active in the freedom struggle, but coming to the democracy or coming to the forefront and speaking and being vocal about the rights, there were very few women who were literate or educated enough to voice their concerns in a holistic manner. So we had only 15. Out of them, we had luminaries like Durgabai Deshmukh, Dakshaini Velayudan, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. So like that, we had legal luminaries, and in fact, if we see the Constituent Assembly debates, we will find that these 15 women were much vocal to in competition with their male counterparts when it comes to the debating of various controversies which arose during the framing of the Constitution. So there was extensive debate, as I told earlier, on various documents and many topics. In fact, Indian Constitution is not something which was created overnight. The basis of the Indian Constitution was derived greatly or largely from the Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 laid down a broad framework for organizing the political system in India. But nevertheless, those provisions of Government of India Act 1935 were intended to support or promote the British interests. Now, since it is no longer our concern to promote the British interests, now we have to look out for ourselves. So what the drafting committee of the Constitution has done, they also went through the various constitutions from the other countries in the world, such as the Constitution of US, Constitution of Australia, Constitution of South America, Constitution of Japan, Constitution of Russia. So what they have done is, they have taken the provisions from the various constitutions which were landmark or which were fundamental or which were in fact innovative in nature. They have discussed, molded them in accordance with the needs of the Indian society, and then they have passed them under the Indian Constitution. They have incorporated the provisions which were borrowed from the foreign constitutions, but nevertheless, they have made the customized changes needed for the Indian polity. Then only it can be done. Why? Because just by adopting the features or the provisions from the other world constitutions is not going to help us. Why? Because Constitution is nothing but it is the mirror of that particular society. So we cannot be expected to have the provisions of US Constitution directly being inserted into our Indian Constitution. That was not the case. So, each and every provision, even if it was borrowed from the other constitutions, was duly deliberated, duly changed and customized to suit the Indian needs. So, here we will see that our Indian Constitution is a very diverse document. It starts from preamble, speaks about the territories, then goes to the citizenship, then speaks about the fundamental rights, then it speaks about the directive principles of state policy, then organization of union government, organization of state government, then organization of judiciary, then it speaks about division of powers and various schedules, so on and so forth. It is a very bulky document which is very detailed in many aspects. The reason for such kind of diversity comes from the very fact that the members of Constituent Assembly are from various diverse backgrounds. Not only you had people from the so-called upper caste, but you also had the people from the oppressed and suppressed caste whose voices were suppressed from ages together. You had members belonging to scheduled castes, and in fact, the chairman of the drafting committee, the legal luminary, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar himself hails from one such community. Then you had backward classes, as well as you had people from other social backgrounds. You had engineers, you had doctors, you had majority of them are lawyers, majority of them are from royal backgrounds, majority of them are from very poor households, farmer families. That is the reason you will find that there much deliberation has been done while drafting the various provisions of our Indian Constitution. So, whenever the Constitution is made, first we are supposed to understand as to what will be the vision or mission of the Constitution. The vision and mission of the Indian Constitution can be clearly discerned from the Objectives Resolution which was moved by Pandit Nehru on 13th December 1946. The Objective Resolution spoke about constituting India into sovereign democratic republic, whereby the people will be given freedom of thought, expression, belief. There will be justice, social, economic, political justice, and there will be the ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity, which was brought directly from the French Revolution. So, this was the mission and vision which was laid down before the Constituent Assembly. Now, the task before Constituent Assembly was to incorporate all these things into a single document called as Constitution of India. While framing the Constitution, there were also the deliberations of hiring constitutional experts like Ivor Jennings, who was a constitutional law expert from UK, for the purpose of framing the Indian Constitution. However, many of the leaders agreed that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who himself is a legal luminary in India, that too, was much suitable for the Indian context. So, he was brought on record as the chairman of the drafting committee. Now, the drafting of the Indian Constitution was humongous. There were numerous amendments which were moved. Out of them, majority of them were negated and some of them were accepted. So, the task before drafting committee was Herculean. In other words, you can say that the drafting committee laid the foundations for the present day Constitution. It gave the final shape which we see today. But nevertheless, I told you that Constitution cannot be a dead letter or something written in stone. It has to evolve in accordance with the times in which we are living. That is the reason that the Constitution makers itself had incorporated provisions for the amendment of Constitution, so that the Constitution can be amended from time to time to suit the needs of that particular age. The net result is today we have more than 100 amendments made to the Indian Constitution. So, the Constituent Assembly had done a very beautiful task of drafting a very dynamic and living Constitution in the present day context. Now, the job of Constituent Assembly, if we analyze, we can see that it is a very well founded document, very well framed document. But the thing is, it is not free from criticism. There are also criticism when it comes to the functioning of the Constituent Assembly. Majority of the jurists or majority of the political scientists, they even say that inclusion of too many lawyers or too many barristers in the framing of the Indian Constitution had contributed to its bulk. It has contributed to its bulk, thereby making Indian Constitution too bulky and too technical. And sometimes bulky and too technical constitutions lead to the unwanted situations. That is, for each and everything you need to go for amendment, the lengthy process of amendment. The next thing is, the Constituent Assembly of India not only acted as the Constituent Assembly of India, but also as the interim parliament for the nation. So that was the reason due to which there were many debates where it was politically charged also. So many thinkers say and constitutional experts say that had the task been entrusted to a dedicated body of only legal luminaries, the result would have been different. The result would have been different. There would not have been any kind of political considerations. But that was the situation. So you had many politicians who were also lawyers contributing to a much diverse document. And the next and foremost thing is the bulkiness of the Indian Constitution. So many legal thinkers say that the Constitution, if it was much manageable in size, it would have been a better Constitution suited to the needs. But laying down each and every nitty-gritties of the governance had contributed to the unnecessary and unwarranted bulk for a document like Constitution. You can compare our Indian Constitution with the US Constitution. US Constitution is often called as pocket Constitution because of its size. It is very small, but yet it is much more powerful than the Indian Constitution. Why? Because it confers vast amount of powers in the hands of executive, so that they can come up with various different solutions and innovations to suit their own needs. That is the reason you have a very powerful executive in the countries like US. Coming to India, due to its vastness of provisions, constitutional provisions, it is not possible to delegate many functions to the bureaucracy. And for each and every small change, you have to change the provision of the Constitution. That has led to the unintended consequence of amending the Constitution every now and then, which can be gauged from the fact that Constitution was enforced on 26th January 1950, whereas the first amendment was made in the year 1951 itself, barely 1 year. So we have more than 100 amendments being made. So on an average, we can say that 2 amendments per year or 1 amendment per year, it is being done even as on today. But nevertheless, these amendments did not erode the actual essence of the Indian Constitution. So the Constituent Assembly, consisting of the legal luminaries, had drafted a very versatile, a very holistic, as well as a living document which is going to rule and govern the country like India. And in fact, we can say that Constitution determines what kind of polity it is. Constitution determines what kind of governance it is. So even Dr. B.R. Ambedkar himself said that all lies in the implementation of the Constitution. There may be good governance, but the Constitution may be bad. Or there may be bad governance, but the Constitution may be good. So to gauge the fact of the success of the Constitution, one has to definitely go into its contents. And the next and most important thing is implementation of the Constitution. If the Constitution is being implemented in a proper manner, in a holistic manner, through checks and balances system, we will find that the Constitution is definitely a successful document. And in fact, Constitution is the highest law of the land. And from the Constitution, all the three branches of the government derive their power. All the three branches, let it be the legislature, let it be the executive, let it be the judiciary. All these three organs derive their powers from the constitution. Now, constitution does not lay down any kind of watertight compartmentalization of powers between executive, legislature and judiciary. At the same time, it tries to maintain something called as the system of checks and balances, which we have in fact borrowed from the American system. System of checks and balances goes hand in hand with the theory of separation of powers. The theory of separation of powers says that the work entrusted to each branch of the government should be done by them only. Legislature makes the law, they are supposed to make only the law. Executive implements the law, judiciary interprets the law. But at the same time, checks and balances says that one branch of the government should not be allowed to overpower the other two, and in such a case, the other two powers are going to bring this particular branch within their boundaries. So, the checks and balances is what protects our Indian democracy from being overpowered by any other branch. Legislatures cannot make their ruthless laws. Executive cannot implement the law in an irregular manner against the natural justice. At the same time, judiciary cannot take law into their own hands. They can only interpret that particular law to suit the needs of the nation, to make sure that it is in accordance with the constitutional framework. So, the constitution is a living document. It is a dynamic document. It is not a dead letter. And in fact, constitution is the most common law which a person comes across in his entire life as a citizen, right from the point where he wakes up till the point when he sleeps in the day. His entire day-to-day life has some or other constitutional dimension attached to it. Constitution is such a wide document that it includes all the rights, all the human rights formalized within itself. The constitution says that you have right to food. The constitution says you have right to sleep. The constitution also says that you have right to marry. And you will find that constitution is a living document, and the most lively part of the constitution is the fundamental rights, the rights which the constitution tries to confer upon its citizens, and the rights which the constitution strives to protect from being trampled by the action of the state or any branch of the state. So, in summary, we can say that Constituent Assembly has played a very significant role in the framing of the Indian Constitution. Constituent Assembly, consisting of all the legal luminaries, had contributed to the bulkiness of the Constitution just for the sake of ensuring that there are no speed breakers in the journey of the Indian democracy. What we are today, how the Indian political system is functioning today, it is all because of which has been laid down in the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution is a very diverse document, and I can say and I can vouch also, there is no other constitution in the world which is as wide or as diverse or as dynamic as the Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution still serves as the guiding light for the journey of the Indian democracy. What we have achieved today, what we have attained today in the present day context has direct relation with the Constitution and implementation of its policies. The young democracy, the largest democracy in the world, is nothing but it is the gift of the Indian Constitution. I think no other democracy in the world is as vocal as Indian democracy, thanks to our Indian Constitution. Constitution, there are certain challenges which are being faced by the Indian Constitution today, but they are smaller in comparison with the success stories of what the Constitution has achieved in these 75 years. So, in conclusion, we can say that the Constitution has contributed significantly to the present day Indian political context. So, Constitution acts as the beacon for Indian democracy. It lays